College move-in day is a whirlwind of emotions, excitement, anxiety, and that strange feeling of standing at the threshold of a new chapter in your life. For Ethan Williams, it was all of those things and more as he stood outside his assigned dormitory, Oakwood Hall, clutching a worn duffel bag in one hand and a box of art supplies in the other. The late August sun beat down on the campus, illuminating the red brick buildings and casting long shadows across the carefully manicured lawns where students and parents bustled about with furniture and boxes. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in his stomach. This was it, the first day of the rest of his life. As his mom had said before hugging him goodbye at the campus entrance, her eyes brimming with tears. The dormitory loomed before him, a 5-story building with large windows reflecting the cloudless sky. Students streamed in and out through the double doors, some laughing with newfound friends, others looking just as lost as Ethan felt. He had always been the quiet one, the boy who preferred the company of his sketchbook to large social gatherings. His high school years had been spent mostly in the art room, where he could express himself through colors and shapes in ways words never seemed adequate. Now, surrounded by strangers in an unfamiliar place, that familiar feeling of being an outsider crept up his spine. Let me explain why this moment matters so much. For many young people, especially those who felt different or out of place, college represents not just academic opportunity, but a chance to redefine themselves, to find their tribe. For Ethan, who had spent years carefully hiding parts of himself in his small conservative hometown, the university promised freedom. The freedom to explore who he truly was without the weight of his family's expectations or his community's judgments. But freedom, as Ethan was quickly realizing, came with its own kind of terror. As Ethan made his way through the crowded lobby, he navigated around parents saying tearful goodbyes and resident assistants giving directions. The air was thick with anticipation and the subtle scent of new carpet. He checked his assignment sheet again, room 312, third floor. The elevator was packed with families and their belongings, so Ethan opted for the stairs, his arms already aching from carrying his possessions. By the time he reached the third floor, his forehead was damp with sweat, and he paused in the hallway to catch his breath. Room 312 was halfway down the corridor. The door was ajar, suggesting his roommate might already be inside. Ethan hesitated, wondering what kind of person he'd be sharing his space with for the next year. Would they get along? Would they have anything in common? Or would it be 9 months of awkward silences and passive-aggressive notes about dirty dishes? With a silent prayer for someone tolerable, Ethan pushed the door open with his foot. The room was empty. 2 bare twin beds sat against opposite walls, accompanied by simple desks and dressers. A small window overlooked the quad, letting in streams of sunlight that illuminated dancing dust particles. Ethan set down his things with a sigh of relief. At least he could get settled before meeting his roommate. He chose the bed on the left side, closest to the window, hoping his future roommate wouldn't mind. There was something comforting about being able to look outside, to be reminded that there was a world beyond these 4 walls. Ethan had just finished making his bed with the blue cotton sheets his mother had insisted on washing before he left home when he heard voices in the hallway growing louder. The door swung open, and in walked the most beautiful boy Ethan had ever seen. Tall with broad shoulders and sun-kissed skin, the stranger had tousled brown hair that fell across his forehead in a way that seemed both careless and deliberate. His smile, directed at someone in the hallway, revealed perfect white teeth and created crinkles around eyes the color of honey. "Thanks for the help, Dad. I'll call you guys tomorrow," the boy said, turning to wave at someone out of sight. When he turned back and noticed Ethan, his smile widened. "Hey, you must be Ethan. I'm Ryan Shun, your roommate." He crossed the room in 3 long strides and extended his hand. Ethan stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his box of art supplies in the process. "Yeah, that's me," he managed, taking Ryan's hand. It was warm and firm, the handshake of someone confident in themselves. "Nice to meet you." "Likewise," Ryan said, glancing around the room. "I see you've claimed the window side. Good choice. I'm more of a wall guy myself." He gestured to the mountain of boxes and bags he'd brought in. "Hope you don't mind if I make a bit of a mess while I unpack. I promise I'm generally pretty tidy." And just like that, the ice was broken. As they unpacked their belongings, Ethan learned that Ryan was from California, played soccer, and was planning to major in environmental science. He spoke with an easy confidence that Ethan envied, telling stories about his high school adventures and his summer working as a lifeguard that had Ethan laughing despite his nerves. "What about you?" Ryan asked as he hung a poster of a national park above his bed. "What's your story, Ethan?" "From Ohio," Ethan supplied. "Small town, probably never heard of it. And not much of a story, honestly. I'm studying art, painting specifically. Been drawing since I could hold a crayon, according to my mom." Ryan's eyes lit up. "That's awesome. Are any of these yours?" He gestured to the sketches Ethan had pinned to the wall beside his desk. Landscapes mostly, safe subjects that wouldn't raise eyebrows back home. "Yeah," Ethan admitted, feeling a flush of pride mixed with embarrassment. "Just some stuff I did last year." Ryan moved closer to examine the drawings. "These are incredible," he said, his voice sincere. "You've got serious talent." The compliment warmed Ethan in a way he wasn't prepared for. "Thanks," he mumbled, busying himself with organizing his desk to hide the blush he could feel spreading across his cheeks. As the afternoon wore on, they continued to unpack and arrange their sides of the room. Ryan seemed to have brought enough sports equipment for an entire team, while Ethan's possessions were mostly books, art supplies, and a modest wardrobe. The contrast between them was stark, yet somehow they moved around each other with an ease that surprised Ethan. There was none of the awkwardness he had feared, just a comfortable rhythm as they transformed the sterile dorm room into something that felt more like a home. It was when Ethan was struggling to fit his fitted sheet over the notoriously difficult dorm mattress that Ryan's kindness truly caught him off guard. After watching Ethan wrestle with the sheet for a few minutes, Ryan laughed and came over to help. "These things are impossible," Ryan said, grabbing one corner of the sheet while Ethan held the other. "My older sister taught me a trick, though. You fold it like this." He demonstrated, his hands quick and sure. Together, they managed to get the sheet on properly, and when they finished, Ryan disappeared into his closet, returning with a set of extra sheets, soft flannel ones with a pattern of pine trees against a dark blue background. "My mom always packs extras," Ryan explained, unfolding the sheets. "She says you never know when you might need them. These are my favorite, super warm for those cold winter nights. We could put them on now if you want. Make your bed extra cozy." Before Ethan could respond, Ryan was already helping him layer the flannel sheets over his regular ones. "Trust me, when January hits and the heating in these old buildings starts acting up, you'll thank me," Ryan said with a wink. What happened next would replay in Ethan's mind for days afterward. As they tucked in the last corner of the sheet, Ryan smoothed his hand over the fabric, creating a neat hospital corner like Ethan's grandmother used to make. Then, with a casual gesture that seemed both thoughtful and intimate, Ryan pulled the sheets back slightly, creating an inviting little nest. "There," he said, "perfect for late-night study sessions or Netflix marathons." Speaking of which, he reached into another box and pulled out a laptop. "Want to break in the new room with a movie tonight? I've got snacks too." That evening, after the chaos of move-in day had settled and the dormitory had quieted down, Ethan found himself sitting on his bed, back against the wall, with Ryan beside him. The laptop was balanced between them, playing some action movie Ryan had chosen. But Ethan could barely focus on the plot. He was acutely aware of Ryan's shoulder pressing against his, of the way Ryan's laugh vibrated through him when something funny happened on screen. As the night grew cooler, Ryan reached down and pulled the flannel sheets up, tucking them around both of their legs. "Told you these would come in handy," he said, his voice soft in the dim light of the room, illuminated only by the glow of the laptop screen. That simple act, the way he brought spare sheets and tucked them around us both, it was such a small thing, but it made Ethan feel seen in a way he hadn't experienced before. It was thoughtful and nurturing, breaking down the barriers of awkward first meetings and creating a space of comfort between two strangers. The days that followed took on a rhythm that Ethan hadn't expected. Mornings were a rush of showers and grabbing breakfast before classes. Ryan was an early riser, always up before the alarm, while Ethan preferred to hit snooze at least twice. Yet somehow, Ryan always made sure to wake him with enough time to get ready, sometimes even bringing back a coffee from the campus cafe if he had an early class. Their evenings often found them back in the dorm room, Ryan sprawled on his bed reading environmental science textbooks, Ethan at his desk working on sketches for his introductory art classes. They'd talk about their days, share stories about particularly eccentric professors, or discuss the merits of the dining hall's attempt at international cuisine. It was easy, comfortable, and nothing like the strained politeness Ethan had expected from a random roommate assignment. A week into the semester, Ryan invited Ethan to a party at one of the off-campus houses where some of the soccer team lived. "You don't have to come if it's not your scene," Ryan said, pulling a clean shirt over his head. "But it might be fun to meet some new people. Plus, I could use a wingman who's not on the team." Ethan hesitated. Parties had never been his thing, and the thought of a house full of athletes intimidated him. But the alternative was staying alone in the dorm on a Friday night, and something about the hopeful look in Ryan's eyes made it hard to say no. "Sure," Ethan found himself saying. "But fair warning, I'm terrible at small talk and even worse at drinking games." Ryan's face lit up. "Don't worry about it. Just stick with me, and you'll be fine. And hey, if it's awful, we can bail and get late-night pancakes at that diner we passed the other day." The party was exactly as Ethan had imagined, crowded, loud, with music thumping through speakers and the distinct smell of beer permeating everything. Ryan seemed in his element, greeting teammates with enthusiastic high-fives and introducing Ethan to what felt like dozens of people whose names blurred together. "This is my roommate, Ethan," Ryan would say, his hand warm on Ethan's shoulder. "He's an artist, like a real one, not just the I doodle when I'm bored in class kind." Each time, Ethan would feel a flush of pleasure at the pride in Ryan's voice. It was strange to be seen through someone else's eyes, to have parts of himself that he considered ordinary reflected back as special. As the night wore on, Ethan found himself in the kitchen, nursing the same cup of lukewarm beer he'd been holding for an hour. Ryan had been pulled into a game of beer pong by his teammates, leaving Ethan to fend for himself. He was considering texting Ryan to say he was heading back to the dorm when a girl with bright pink hair leaned against the counter beside him. "You look about as thrilled to be here as I am," she said, raising her voice to be heard over the music. Ethan laughed. "That obvious, huh?" "Only to a fellow wallflower," she replied, raising her cup in a toast. "I'm Zoe. My roommate dragged me here promising the party of the semester, which apparently means watching a bunch of jocks try to throw ping-pong balls into cups." "Ethan," he said, clinking his cup against hers. "And yeah, not really my scene either. My roommate's on the soccer team." Zoe's eyes widened. "Wait, are you Ryan Chen's roommate? The one he's always talking about?" Ethan blinked in surprise. "He talks about me?" "Oh yeah," Zoe nodded, taking a sip of her drink. "I have environmental ethics with him. He's mentioned his artist roommate a few times. Said you're super talented." A warm feeling spread through Ethan's chest that had nothing to do with the beer. Before he could respond, Ryan appeared at his side, slightly flushed from the game and the alcohol. "There you are," Ryan said, slinging an arm around Ethan's shoulders. "I was looking for you." "Hey, Zoe, I see you've met my roommate." "Just getting acquainted," Zoe said with a knowing smile that made Ethan wonder what else Ryan had said about him. "I was telling Ethan how you've been singing his praises in class." Ryan didn't seem embarrassed by this revelation. If anything, his grin widened. "Just spreading the word about future famous artists. Got to say I knew him when, right?" He squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "Speaking of which, we should probably head out. Early studio session tomorrow, right?" Ethan didn't have a studio session scheduled for Saturday, but he nodded gratefully, recognizing the lifeline Ryan was throwing him. They said their goodbyes to Zoe and a few others before stepping out into the cool night air. "Sorry if that wasn't your thing," Ryan said as they walked back toward campus. "I just thought, I don't know, that it might be good to get out. Meet people." "It's okay," Ethan assured him. "It wasn't that bad. And I did meet people. Zoe seems nice." Ryan nodded. "She is. Smart too, always challenging the professor with questions about ethical frameworks and stuff." He paused, then added, "So, pancakes? I believe I promised late-night breakfast food as a consolation prize." And just like that, they were sitting in a vinyl booth at an all-night diner, sharing a stack of blueberry pancakes and laughing about the party. Ryan recounted a particularly disastrous round of beer pong that had ended with someone's phone in the cup, while Ethan described the increasingly elaborate backstories he'd made up for himself when introduced to Ryan's friends. "Wait, you told Mike you were raised by wolves?" Ryan asked, nearly choking on his coffee. He wasn't really listening anyway. Ethan shrugged. "And it was more interesting than saying I'm from Ohio for the 15th time." As they walked back to the dorm, full of pancakes and comfortable in each other's company, Ethan felt a shift in their friendship. There was something about sharing late-night conversations in an empty diner that created a different kind of intimacy than their everyday interactions. Back in their room, they both changed into sleep clothes, moving around each other with the familiar choreography they developed over the past week. Ethan was about to climb into bed when Ryan spoke up. "Hey, I've been thinking," he said, sitting on the edge of his own bed. "Would you want to maybe draw me sometime? Like, as practice for your figure drawing class?" The question caught Ethan off guard. "You want me to draw you?" Ryan nodded, a hint of vulnerability in his expression that Ethan hadn't seen before. "Yeah, if you want to. I just thought it might be helpful for you. And, well, I'm curious to see how you'd capture me on paper." The thought of studying Ryan's face, of having permission to really look at him without fear of being caught staring, sent a thrill through Ethan. "Sure," he said, trying to sound casual. "That would be great practice. Thanks." Ryan's smile was soft. "Cool. Just let me know when." He climbed into his bed, pulling his covers up. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Ryan," Ethan replied, turning off his bedside lamp and lying down in the darkness. As he drifted toward sleep, Ethan couldn't help but think about how different his college experience was turning out to be from what he'd expected. Instead of isolation and awkwardness, he'd found a friendship that made him feel more at home than he ever had in his actual hometown. And if sometimes he caught himself watching Ryan a bit too long, or if his heart beat a little faster when Ryan casually touched his shoulder or sat close beside him, well, that was something he could deal with later. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of classes, assignments, and increasingly comfortable routines. Ethan's art professors pushed him to explore new techniques and subjects, encouraging him to move beyond the safe landscapes he'd specialized in. His figure drawing class was particularly challenging, forcing him to capture the human form in quick gestures and detailed studies alike. It was after one particularly frustrating session where Ethan had struggled to get the proportions right on a model that Ryan's offer came back to mind. That evening, as they sat in their room, Ethan working on a paper while Ryan read a novel for his literature elective, Ethan finally worked up the courage to ask, "Remember when you offered to model for me?" he said, trying to sound casual. "Is that still on the table?" Ryan looked up from his book, a smile spreading across his face. "Absolutely. When do you want to do it?" "Now," Ethan suggested, "if you're not too busy. Just a quick sketch to practice." Ryan set his book aside immediately. "I'm all yours. How do you want me? Sitting? Standing? Should I flex?" He struck an exaggerated bodybuilder pose that made Ethan laugh. "Just sit naturally," Ethan said, pulling out his sketchbook and a pencil. "Maybe on your bed, leaning against the wall. Read your book if you want. It's better if you're doing something normal." Ryan settled into position, picking up his book again, but keeping his eyes on Ethan. "Like this." Ethan nodded, already studying the lines of Ryan's face, the way the light from the desk lamp cast shadows under his cheekbones. "Perfect. Just try not to move too much." For the next half hour, the room was quiet except for the soft scratch of pencil on paper and the occasional rustle as Ryan turned a page. Ethan lost himself in the drawing, in capturing the relaxed curve of Ryan's shoulders, the concentration in his eyes as he read, the way his hair fell across his forehead. It was intimate in a way Ethan hadn't anticipated, this quiet observation, this careful study of another person's features. "Can I see?" Ryan asked eventually, setting his book down. Ethan hesitated. The drawing was good, one of his best, actually, but it also revealed more than he'd intended. There was a softness to how he'd rendered Ryan's expression, a tenderness in the details that spoke volumes about Ethan's feelings. "It's not finished," Ethan hedged. "Please." Ryan's voice was gentle. "I promise not to judge. Artist's prerogative and all that." With a sigh, Ethan handed over the sketchbook. Ryan took it carefully, his eyes widening as he looked at the drawing. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Ethan's stomach twisted with anxiety. "Ethan," Ryan finally said, his voice hushed. I don't even know what to say. You made me look." He trailed off, still staring at the sketch. "If you don't like it," Ethan began, but Ryan cut him off. "No, that's not it at all. It's just, you see me like this? Really?" There was wonder in his voice, and something else Ethan couldn't quite identify. Ethan swallowed hard. "That's how you look to me," he admitted quietly. Ryan looked up from the drawing, his eyes meeting Ethan's with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "No one's ever seen me like this before," he said. "Like I'm worth really looking at." The vulnerability in Ryan's voice broke something open in Ethan. "You are," he said simply. "Worth looking at, I mean. Worth seeing." For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Then Ryan carefully set the sketchbook aside and moved to sit next to Ethan on his bed. "Can I tell you something?" Ryan asked, his voice low. When Ethan nodded, he continued, "I requested a roommate change the day before move-in. My original assignment was with this guy I knew from high school. Total jerk who made my life miserable when I came out sophomore year. But the housing office said it was too late. All the rooms were assigned." He took a deep breath. Then, miraculously, there was a last-minute opening with some freshmen from Ohio. "I didn't know anything about you, but I figured anyone was better than being stuck with someone who'd already decided to hate me." Ethan blinked in surprise. "You're gay?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Ryan nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Yeah, I thought you knew. I haven't exactly been subtle about checking you out." Heat rushed to Ethan's face. No, I didn't know," he stammered. "I mean, I hoped, maybe, but I didn't want to assume." "And now that you do know?" Ryan asked, his expression open but cautious. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. "Now I'm really glad the housing office had a last-minute opening," he said softly. Ryan's smile widened, relief and joy lighting up his features. "Me too," he said, and then, with a gentleness that made Ethan's heart ache, he reached out and took Ethan's hand in his. "Really, really glad." That night, they talked for hours, sharing stories they'd held back before. Ethan told Ryan about growing up in a small town where being different in any way was a liability, about hiding his sexuality behind a facade of shyness, about using art as an outlet for all the things he couldn't say out loud. Ryan spoke about coming out in high school, about losing friends but finding unexpected allies, about his parents' journey from confusion to fierce support. As the night grew late and their voices grew tired, Ryan got up and retrieved the flannel sheets from the closet again. Without a word, he spread them over Ethan's bed, creating a cocoon of warmth against the autumn chill that had begun to seep into the old dormitory building. Then, with a questioning look that Ethan answered with a nod, Ryan climbed in beside him. They lay facing each other, close enough to share breath, but not quite touching, both aware of the threshold they were about to cross. "Is this okay?" Ryan whispered, his hand hovering near Ethan's waist. "More than okay," Ethan replied, and closed the distance between them. Ryan's kiss was gentle at first, a tentative press of lips that quickly deepened as Ethan responded. It felt like coming home, like finding a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Ryan rested his forehead against Ethan's. "I've been wanting to do that since move-in day," Ryan admitted, his voice rough. Ethan laughed softly. "Really? Even when I was wrestling with that fitted sheet and swearing like a sailor?" "Especially then," Ryan grinned. "You looked so determined." It was adorable. They kissed again, more confident now, hands exploring cautiously over clothes, learning the contours of each other's bodies. There was no rush, just the slow discovery of touch and taste, and the growing certainty that this was the beginning of something significant. Later, as they lay tangled together under the flannel sheets, Ryan's arm a comforting weight across Ethan's waist, Ethan thought about all the ways his life had changed in just a few short weeks. He'd come to college hoping for a fresh start, a chance to explore his identity away from the constraints of his hometown. What he hadn't expected was to find someone who would make that journey feel not just possible, but joyful. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan murmured, his breath warm against Ethan's neck. "Just how different things turned out from what I expected," Ethan replied, turning to face him. "In the best possible way." Ryan smiled, tracing a finger along Ethan's cheek. "You know, my mom always says everything happens for a reason. I never really believed her until now." As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in flannel sheets and each other's arms, Ethan couldn't help but agree. There was a reason the housing office had assigned them to room 312, a reason Ryan had brought spare sheets and tucked them around them both that first night. Some might call it coincidence or luck, but lying there in the quiet darkness, feeling Ryan's heartbeat against his own, Ethan preferred to think of it as fate. The journey ahead wouldn't be without its challenges. There would be difficult conversations with family members, navigating the complexities of being out on campus, learning how to balance their relationship with academic demands and social lives. But in that moment, safe in the cocoon they'd created together, those challenges seemed manageable, even welcome, the necessary steps in building something real and lasting. As sleep claimed him, Ethan's last conscious thought was of gratitude, for new beginnings, for the courage to be vulnerable, and for the simple, profound comfort of being truly seen by another person. In the spare sheets that Ryan had brought and the arms that now held him close, Ethan had found not just warmth but home. Total _char_count, 18,837.